Hey, Rebel Bankers, this is your host, Chris Noggle, and welcome back to the show. I am here with an extra special guest, one that I've gotten to know quite well, Robert Heyder. And Robert has one hell of a business, and we're going to talk a lot about his business, the obstacles he's had to overcome in getting his businesses up and running. But just to kind of give you guys just a quick recap without wasting a ton of time, first off, Robert's only 37 years old. I want you to remember that. Keep that in mind. 37. And he owns Core Properties, which is a wholesale commercial property company. He has a podcast, so make sure you check his podcast out. It's called Level Up Real Estate Investing. But just some of the accolades and highlights. His wholesale company did 190 deals this year. His brokerage division, which has 13 agents, did $60 million in value. Okay, I wouldn't know a thing about the brokerage, but that sounds pretty darn good. He has a small hard money lending arm. He does some note purchasing, which is a great business. He owns and manages commercial properties. I'll let him tell you how many of those he's got, but 60 residential doors just to get you warmed up. And he's got this really cool company that does virtual assistants, and that company is called Bottleneck Real Estate. So welcome to the show, Robert.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You're very welcome. And we're going to jump kind of into your whole story, what your company looks like in just a second. But for all of you watching this, you guys all have probably tuned into this before. And if you haven't, please start telling people about it, because the knowledge that is dropped on this podcast is knowledge that literally will level you up and will catapult your business forward faster, smarter, and more efficiently. But only if you take action. You know, we're always talking about you guys becoming rebel bankers. And in order to become a rebel banker, the first thing is you got to kind of first understand how money really works. Secondly, you got to take some action. You got to get out of your couch, get out of in front of your computer. Now, just after this episode, you can then leave your computer, but you got to go out there and make shit happen. People that just sit around and gather information never get anywhere. And that is not you guys, because you guys are my rebel bankers. So get out there, pound the pavement. We're approaching a new year. 2020 is right in the horizons, literally a few days away. So you better have your list of things you're going to accomplish in 2020. And you know what better way to start than right here and right now. So let's jump right into this. Robert, thanks again for joining us for the Real Estate Money School podcast here. And, you know, tell everybody just a little bit about your companies, where you're at today, and what it looks like living in your life.
Yeah, you know, we've got a lot going on. I like to stay busy. My business partner is kind of the same way. So, you know, anytime we get a little bit of free time, we just backfill it with some more activities and other arms, something along those lines. But, you know, kind of our main kind of core business is real estate wholesaling. You know, you know, our goal was 200 deals this year. We're a little bit short, but we got a little bit of time left in the year still. We got a couple of days. We'll see. But yeah, things are rocking. You know, for a long time, we were doing a lot more rehabbing, and then recently, well, not recently, last 2 years or so, we've scaled more into wholesaling and doing a little bit less rehabbing these days, just from the time allocation. But started the brokerage. Brokerage is up and going. A big avenue we've been leaning towards, and really is kind of my bigger passion, is the commercial real estate investing, and then the note purchasing. So those are the two avenues that I've been spending a lot of time on recently. We're up to about 110,000, a little over 110,000 square feet of commercial real estate that we own and manage. And I've got another 51,000 square feet under contract that should close in the first, definitely in the first quarter. They should close in February of 2020. So one of them is in Indianapolis and one is here in St. Louis, that we'll move our office into a portion of it and then lease the rest of it out. And then obviously we got the other arm. So we got the hard money lending that is really more of just an offshoot of our wholesaling business. We saw a lot of the folks that we were working with going out and getting hard money lending on the deals we were selling them. So we thought, hey, we're already here. We know the deals, we know the folks. Let's just add to what we already got. And that's a pretty good little offshoot. But the really exciting thing that we've been rolling out is the virtual assistants business. You know, that's been a big piece that's allowed us to scale, and I'm really excited about it. And I've found that most investors out there are on the visionary side, right? So they've got big dreams, big goals. They're looking to do things, but implementing the virtual assistants is kind of the hard part, right? It's like, okay, well, maybe they don't have the systems and the processes defined. They don't, they've never really managed many people before. They're them and a partner, or them by themselves, or them and a spouse, something along those lines as the investor. So we kind of help bridge that gap and help people get the systems and processes implemented, and then also make or have the virtual assistant provide the tracking so that they can kind of stay on pace and have like a weekly meeting to do a catch up. So a unique little twist that we've kind of put on the virtual assistant side that I think will really help with folks, and it's helped with us greatly. So, but that's a lot. That's what we got going on. Stay busy.
Yeah, I'd say that's a lot going on. It's a lot of companies to run. And I mean, running one company's enough work for just about anybody. And you've got all these things going on, and you still have time to travel. Cause I know I see you at some really fun places like Cabo and, Las Vegas. And, we spend some good time together at the masterminds that we're part of. So obviously you're doing something right. And I think that virtual assistant company is definitely probably playing a big part in that. One of the things you said, Robert, that I'm hearing it a lot, a lot of the people that we're having on this podcast and just a lot of the investors I'm coming across, they're talking a lot about how they're doing less rehabbing, less flips, and a lot more wholesale. What would you say the number one reason is why you're transitioning away from the rehab model into the wholesale model?
Biggest was just time allocation for us, to rehab at scale. Had a big project management aspect, right? A majority of the rehabs that we were doing were larger scale, so over $100,000 in construction spend. We were doing more on the higher end of the price point. So our average price point in St. Louis is about $225,000 for a home sale, and our average rehab price that we were doing, taking it to market at, was probably $650,000 or so, and it was kind of etching up. We've done a good amount of $700,000, $800,000 rehabs. We've done a couple of $1 million plus, and the timeline and the amount of effort and just headaches and burdens and it was pressing. It was a pressing task to do it at scale.
Dude, you're sweating, man. You're starting to sweat just thinking about it.
I'm out on it. Yeah. No, doing one or two is not that big of a deal. To do them and kind of get the scale going, it's a lot. So we slowed down on that.
You should be sitting on this side, because I'm listening to you talk about that, and just your whole aura as you started going deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole just changed. The voice, the overall. So funny.
You could see it and
I could hear it, I could see it, I could feel it, because I know exactly what you're talking about. But yeah. All right. I don't even think you needed to say it. Anybody that's watching this podcast, and actually looking at you, is going to be able to say, yep, that's a good reason why he's not doing the rehabbing anymore.
Yeah, I don't have to say any words. You can just see it on my face. No, that's fantastic.
Oh, man, that's wonderful. Well, let's take a few minutes. Let's go back in time, because I always one of the most important things that I've learned from is people's journey and understanding how they got from where they were on that first deal to where they are now. So you're 37. Take us back to the first deal you did, and what was it like back then? What was that first deal like? What did it mean to you? And how did you get from there to here? And tell us the nitty gritty about what that looked like.
Yeah. So I wanted to get into real estate investing. I got out of college in 2004, and I'd started looking for any way to get involved. I was just looking for any kind of deal, and I had a really hard time finding anything, right? 2004, 2005, 2006, everyone knows those were just hot years. So, and I didn't know much about deal finding. There wasn't a whole lot of information out there. There were a couple groups in town that seemed to, buy a majority of the foreclosure deals and so on and so forth. It was hard to find anything. So after looking and kind of getting a slow start while working a full-time job, it wasn't until 2009 or maybe even late 2008 that opportunities started kind of coming up that you'd see out there. As the banking crisis kind of came about, we started seeing some stuff. So bought my first deal in late 2008 and brought it to market in 2009. And it was a relatively easy rehab. It was, 1,200 square foot, 3-bed, 1.5 bath house. Nothing too out of the ordinary with it. It was a ranch. It had a basement, but relatively easy rehab for the most part. We went over budget a little bit and everything was okay, except what happened was we were at a little bit of the higher end for that type of house in that neighborhood, in that area. Also, it was really unique where it was in a different school district than most of the surrounding area, a much better school district. So the houses around it that were in that school district were much higher price point, and this was only about a $230,000 house, right? So when it came down to it, it didn't appraise, and we just ran into issue after issue after issue of getting this thing sold, and finally, kind of just through sheer effort and hard work, we found a couple off-market deals that sold, that finally the appraiser was willing to kind of include in the appraisal, and we almost lost the buyer. It took about an extra 2 months, so it just sucked a bunch of the kind of the cash out of the deal for holding it. I think we actually ended up having to do a little bit of a concession to get down to the appraised value. The appraiser came up, but we still had to come down a little bit. So that was a big press. It was super stressful, especially on your first deal. When a deal like that goes over and the timing gets extended, it just eats at it a little bit. So that was the first one. And thinking back, that was a really frustrating time, those 2 months or 3 months of trying to bang that thing through and trying to get it pushed home. I assumed that a majority of the issues would be, finding the deal was tough, but then getting it through construction, which was a little bit of a hassle the first time, like a lot of mistakes made. But beyond that, I did not see the buyer's financing or the appraisal being the issue. So it kind of caught me out of left field and caused a bunch of issues. And on the first deal, I was doing a lot of the work. I had a business partner at the time. We were doing a lot of work on it. So we'd get off work at 5 or 5:30, show up, change out of, our clothes, change into construction gear and get to work and, drive home at 11 o'clock at night with, drywall dust in your hair and start back over.
I remember that, man. That was my first deal. Exactly. I'd leave the financial firm, come in a suit, full suit to the work site, change outside because God forbid I go inside and get dirty, put my work clothes on, work till 11 at night, go home dirty and repeat the process. Oh man, the good old days.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's it. And then in the morning you'd come out and I'd be dressed back up in a suit. I was in banking at the time. I'd dress back up in a suit, go out. I'd go out with like a wet washcloth. So I had to wipe down my seat because I didn't want all the drywall dust that I drove home in all over the suit. Oh, it was funny. But the burden really was, so there was a ton of issues with that, but even mentally, like I still hadn't come to the point that like that wasn't just a fluke good purchase. We made $35,000 on that deal after all was said and done. I thought we should have made $10,000 more than that, aside from the concessions, and actually probably more than that. So I think it was about a $7,000 or $8,000 concession, and then 2.5 months of additional hold. So we should have made a fair amount more than that, but it was still, for most folks, their first deal, that's not too terribly bad at that price point. But my biggest fear was just, or the mental burden or hurdle was just, was this a fluke? Did we just find a good deal and we made it work? Can we find more? Can it be repeatable? So about 3 or 4 months later, I found another deal, actually kind of in that same little niche area, which worked out well because I could use my old sale as the comp. And then we found the second one. So that was kind of the big aha, or the big relief, saying, okay, yeah, we can find more of these. And that one was a short sale. So that one was a kind of a unique thing that was obviously starting to really get legs coming out of the recession. But it was taxing. It was a tough first one. And I remember it well.
So after that first one, like what happened? Like, so you sold that one. It was kind of a tough one. You're probably like, wow, I don't know if I want to do this again. I know my first one, I was supposed to make 30 grand and I made 8,500. And regardless of making 8,500 or 30, it was just, I was hooked. Like, I was just like, I made money. I can do this. I can do it better. And that's what kind of got me going again. Like, what was it? So after that point, what year was that when you did that first one?
It would have, 09 is when it actually sold.
So right after the recession. So 09. So then you have from 09 till now, like what happened? When did you actually start hitting your stride? Like what were the next deals and like, how did money play into that? So like bring us from that first deal and what you learned on that all the way through to where you are today.
Okay. So the second deal was kind of the real catalyst, right? So for me, I knew I wanted to do it. And even after the burdens and after the hurdles of the first one, that didn't really shake me off. So I knew I was still there. My biggest thing was getting over the fact that, like, can I find enough deals? So that single issue probably plagued me for probably through about 2000, 2012 or so. I was just worried about finding replicable deals and being able to offset my income that I was making in banking. So I was, like I said, I was in banking. I was relatively successful pretty young. So my expectations were pretty high on what I needed to kind of offset, even though I didn't enjoy banking too terribly much. For the long term, it was good. It was great for the time being, but I knew that wasn't where I wanted to be for the long term. So I was always kind of looking for this additional thing. And just being able to find enough deals was my biggest burden, and kind of keeping that cash flow coming. So I was just kind of doing one or two on the side here and there. And I thought, okay, well, I'll build up a rental portfolio to offset my income and kind of have something kind of reoccurring coming in. And then realized after a little while, it's pretty difficult to bring in enough income on a residential rental portfolio to really offset your income basis. But it didn't stop me. I was still kind of working through that. And fortunately, because of my full-time job and was making a fair amount of income, it allowed me to have a little bit more flexibility than I might have otherwise had. And also with a W-2 income and some banking contacts, I was able to get local bank financing to rehab the deals. So
that's important. That's key. And a lot of people, maybe don't look so good on paper, don't have the knowledge of the banking industry. And that W-2 income, as much as we're always trying to get out of that trading hours for dollars, but I think in the beginning, it helps you. It helps you tremendously get off the ground.
It was huge. Yeah. I mean, I had to come up with 20% cash, which I was able to do, which was a huge benefit, especially after that first deal. Just within with the income that was produced. But, so that wasn't necessarily the thing. And then getting the bank financing was a huge benefit. I don't know what rates were then, 5 or 6% and 20% down at a point, or, point and a half or something on the deal. But it made it a lot more palatable. And if timing went over, it still cost more. And there was definitely cost, but it didn't eat quite as strong as, traditional kind of hard money loan or even private funding, something along those lines. So it made that work. So from that point on, just kind of went, but I couldn't find a replicable amount of deals. And then I stumbled across Sean Terry's podcast randomly. And I didn't really know a whole lot about wholesaling at the time. And so that was kind of the avenue that opened it up for me. I was like, oh, wow, here's something. And that mentally kind of bridged the gap on kind of working capital, right? Because rehabs, you put the 20% down, so you put a lot of money up for a bank financing deal. And honestly, I didn't know a whole lot about hard money back then either. So I was kind of the opposite of most folks. Is I knew how to get bank financing, and I knew to rehab, but I didn't know about wholesaling, and I didn't really know a whole lot about hard money lending at the time. So, which might have been a benefit, because then I wouldn't have had so much cash tied up in each deal that would have allowed to bridge the gap of just having the nest egg or the amount of money set aside in savings to make, kind of jumping into it full time a little bit easier. But was doing that, kind of working through it, doing some on the side, and then found Sean Terry's podcast, understood wholesaling, and said, okay, well, if all these people are doing it, I'm sure I can probably do this. I just have to ramp it up and do the marketing, kind of get out there and do it. I found that in 2012. And then with that, I was also able, through enough rehabs, to set aside about a year's worth of income, kind of in a separate savings account, and said, okay, with that, I think I can go. So I was set to quit my full-time job at the end of 2012. I was working on a big deal for a client that I really liked that wasn't going to close until March of 2013. So I agreed to stay on and kind of finalize that deal for them. And so I ended up quitting in I guess right at the end of March of 2013. But there were a lot of struggles, and honestly, I think the real struggles kind of occurred after kind of quitting my full-time job and getting into it. That first year was a taxing year. That's where the real kind of punch in the face started to occur.
And I think that's probably very real for a lot of people, because there's a ton of people that I talk to that are right on the verge of like, I can't wait to leave my job. And, I know it's exciting to get out of that rat race and trading hours for dollars, but then you go into the other side where, if you jump too early, that can be a really tough thing. And a lot of times that can mean somebody fails and they got to go back to that world that they just left. Sometimes it's better just to stay in the world that you're trying to avoid until until the seed you planted has matured enough to the point where it's actually going to provide you fruits for your labor.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's tough. It's really tough because we all want to get out of that and we want to go full into it. We want to spend all of our time on it. But, like you just said, that was tough. When you left, you were so used to, probably bi-weekly in the banking, you just, you could count on that check. It just came in and then all of a sudden now it's gone. And now you got to go out there and you gotta, go make it happen. And that was probably difficult.
100%. Yeah. That was the big piece. Cause prior to that, right, when you're flipping a house or doing whatever, it just all goes, to the side. It's extra money. It's bonus money. Right. Well, then now you've got to live off of what comes in. So it's entirely different. And very quickly, I had couple cost overruns on deals that I just had to fund out of pocket. So that ate away at some of my safety reserve that kind of allowed me to jump off. And then, kind of ramping up marketing and trying to understand all of that, getting that going, that ate at it quite a bit. And then, the rehabs just didn't produce the profit, or the costs were higher out of the gate. And then, man, my third deal off of my own full-time was a second story addition on a project I was doing. And the GC on the deal essentially committed fraud. He was getting, the GC payments, and then he was fraudulently signing the lien waivers for the subs and not paying the subs. So we get, about 3/4 of the way through. I'm starting to run into issues with the GC. The project's stalling out. I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And then in addition to that, then I'm starting to get calls from the subs saying that they haven't been paid, and trying to, and really having no real understanding of what that looked like or kind of what the ramifications were. Just thinking everything was going okay because I had the lien waivers. I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing. And then figuring that out and then kind of unwinding that web of BS and, trying to get someone to come in and take back over from that point. It was a huge hurdle because it was the biggest project we'd done to date, and at a big construction budget, and it was just kind of sitting there and eating. It was just, I needed the income to come in from a working capital standpoint to offset the spend, offset all the cost overruns. Now I had even more cost overruns because I'm having to pay some of these subs twice because they weren't going to come back, and trying to figure out from a legal standpoint, what the hell do I do with this GC who's fraudulently doing this? And, at the very last thing I want to do is start opening up a legal retainer and having to pay an attorney to come in and fix a bunch of this. So it was a really, really pressing time. And honestly, at almost the exact same time, I owned a small roofing company that I started. I thought would be a
roofing company.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Hold on. I got a button for that. Yeah, that's about what I'm sure is coming with a roofing company.
Oh man, it was something. Honestly, the roofing company should have worked. I should not have started it, but in hindsight, because it was just trying to manage all those things was just a poor decision. But it should have worked. In St. Louis, we had a bunch of storm damage that came through. A majority of anything we were going to do was going to be insurance based, and with the amount of rehabs that we were trying to work through and the amount of rental properties that we were buying and other folks that we had a pretty good backlog of business. It's we had a scenario where we had a big job. It was $150,000 job that we had after a big storm came through St. Louis. Tornadoes came through and it blew off the roof of this house, the fence, the garage door, a bunch of siding, some windows. I mean, it was a pretty good sized project. And we got all the way through it, and we were due to get the last payment. So they kind of got paid in 3 payments. It was $45,000 up front, $30,000 midway, and then the final payment was $75,000. And the insurance company cut the check to the bank and the homeowner. And then typically what happens in those scenarios is the homeowner then endorses the check and then sends it to the bank. And then the bank then ensures all the work was completed, all the lien waivers are collected because they don't want liens to go against a property they got a mortgage against. And then the bank will then write the check to the homeowner and the contractor to get co-endorsed and kind of move on. Well, what happened was the bank didn't include us on the check. So the homeowner got the check and then just said, hey, get screwed. And they just took it. And so it was about, and that was another issue, literally almost at the exact same time. So we had about $35,000 or $40,000 in expenses out that we needed that check to pay for folks. And then also, the profit that was in that deal was supposed to be coming back to us for that. And, we've been working on this thing for 4.5 months and it just didn't come. So we had to then sue them, and it took about 22 months. It was just the biggest battle ever. And it just drew out all the extra cash. I mean, it was a pressing first year. Literally to have both those scenarios going at the same time. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is like something you read about. And I thought, okay, well, shit, I'm gonna be back in banking in no time.
So sometimes in life, we get all these great ideas, kind of like you're saying, the roofing company got all these things going on paper, and in theory they should work.
Yeah.
But then in reality, sometimes you spread yourself so thin for your time, your energy, and your resources that literally all it takes is, what do they say? The straw that broke the camel's back. And that's a dangerous position. You luckily made it through, but there's a lot of people that don't.
No. And honestly, on paper, I shouldn't have made it through. It was a taxing time. Fortunately, we were able to write most of those checks and get folks to kind of wait it out. I did not see it taking 22 months. I mean, 22 months of legal work was like $18,000 in legal fees. We ended up settling. They owed us $75,000. They ended up paying us like $55,000. And then some other folks jumped in the deal. And by the time it was all said and done, there was nothing left. And we closed up the roofing company and called it. So just glad to be done with that guy.
Lick your wounds and move on.
Licked our wounds and moved on. Fortunately, the rehab that we had going on, we got through all the BS, got the subs kind of caught back up, got the GC out of there, got it, the rest of the rehab done. It sat, by the time we got it done, it was January, or maybe even the end of December. So, timing just, killed us. Yeah. So we came back out in December's probably like in Buffalo, but, December and January in St. Louis is a really bad time to sell. It's cold and wet. And so it sat on the market. So we finally, I think, got it sold in probably April or May.
Holy cow, so you held it that long.
Yeah.
And the carry cost, a lot of people don't realize how severe those carry costs are. When you're in a project that's had those kind of issues, you got overruns, you're over budget, and then all of a sudden you hit the market at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. Man, those 3 months, they feel like they're eternity. And writing those checks every month to carry that property, you have to, man, that's hard. I've been there too many freaking times.
Oh yeah. It eats. And this was, like I said, this is the biggest project we'd ever done.
Yeah.
So it was something. And the bank's asking us, hey, what's going on? Where you at? And oh man. But yeah, so finally got that. I mean, we probably owned that thing for just under a year. It was it ate. And especially when before, if it was just side, something on the side, it wouldn't have been great, but at least you had some offsetting income. You had something going on. You didn't need that income from that project to fund everything. So this was a lot all at once. So it was a troubling time. Yeah. But
when you sold did you guys profit big like you thought? Because it was your biggest deal?
Yeah, we did. We actually did profit pretty well on that deal. We anticipated to make a good amount. I mean, it was a second story addition. We had $180,000 of construction proceeds. It was a pretty good project. Been
there. I hate those deals.
Yeah.
I run from them today. Oh my gosh.
That's why I was sweating earlier when he asked me that question. But no, we ended up making like $70,000 or so on that project. I think my pro forma had like 110 or something. Sure. So it, I think we had about 25,000 in extra costs that we had to pay folks, and then a fair amount of additional hold, and just, anytime a project gets off like that and it gets off the rails and it takes longer, it's, it just eats, money just flies out the window. I think we sold it for more than we thought we were going to sell it for, which was a saving grace. Mm-hmm. But, to profit, 65% of what we thought we were. But we got out of it. We made some money. We were able to pay back a lot of stuff and kind of get back on the road and just kind of get out there and run from that point.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I mean the rest of the resume, points out that those, I love talking about those hard deals because those are the ones you learn from. The ones that you do that you make money on. You they really don't teach you anything. It's kind of like, great, that's another win. But then those ones you just talked about, those are the ones you learn everything, and you learn how not to make those same mistakes ever again. So after all of that, like, what would you say the biggest external obstacle you had to face was during this entire process from, say, 2013 till today? What's that biggest external obstacle?
Oh man. Biggest external obstacle. That's a great question. I would say probably not getting stretched too thin. I think that's probably one of my biggest issues. And you look at all the stuff we got going on, you can probably see that, we just stay really busy and have a lot of stuff going on. So, when a hurdle and, when you run into an issue or roadblock on one, it often kind of contributes and falls into more than one category, and it just stretches you. When you're trying to run at 85 or 90% capacity, it only leaves a small amount of additional time for issues to pop up. So, and when one does pop up and it's a bigger issue, there's not a whole lot of extra time or resources available to throw at it. So you can get stretched pretty easily. So maybe that's the biggest external obstacle. Trying to think through it. Yeah, I'm kind of.
Well, that's a good one. How about internal obstacles? What would be your biggest internal obstacle you've faced during that time? I mean, coming from banking, going off on your own. I mean, there's not a lot of people that do that, and not a lot of people that do it as successfully as you. So I'm sure you've had that inner demon, if you will, battling sometimes. Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just kind of second guessing what you're doing. I mean, because when you're in banking, I know there's a system and a process for everything, and then when you're going into an entrepreneurial field, like, there's so many open variables, and then also, not really knowing where to go to when a big problem arises. I specifically dealt with that with some of this legal stuff out of the gate. We've learned a lot about that and got our arms around the legal side and the lien side and all of that. That, got that pretty tightened up, but I wouldn't have had it not been for some of those big issues. Another variable is really understanding and realizing how big of or how important leadership is. Actually having to be the leader and having to manage your team and keep everyone kind of rowing in the right direction and keep enthusiasm and morale up when things maybe aren't going as well as you'd like. That's a big piece as you kind of grow a business and kind of scale it up that I don't think people talk about too terribly much.
Yeah, and it's huge.
I mean, that's been a big internal variable, just every day trying to get better and better at that. And then developing the systems and process and management system to actually run the business properly. That's a big variable. We use Traction, which has been just game changing for us, and kind of following the scorecard and following the KPIs and being able to apply it to each individual different business has allowed us to really kind of be able to scale that up and look at it and stay on track for the most part. Issues and hurdles come up like anything, but having that has been a big thing. And that's probably one of the bigger hurdles that we realized, for the last handful of years before implementing it and actually kind of using it appropriately.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, we struggle with a lot of the same things. I mean, I've been where you are, where I had all these different companies. And in 2018, I was so stressed out. I was running in 1,000 directions. I felt like I couldn't get anything to work right because I'm just doing too many things. Couldn't work enough hours. And then all of a sudden in 18, myself and my team literally had a real sit down, one of those sit downs that you dread, but one of those where we literally had to decide, what are we going to throw out? What's going to go out in the trash can and what's going to go up on the shelf. And that's hard when you've put all this time and energy into all these businesses. And then you come down and you say, look, if we're ever going to go and make this what we want, we're going to have to focus on specifically the lines of business that we want to go forward with. So we had to make some hard decisions in 18, and we tabled a couple of the businesses, which we thought were the big ones, but they just, not going to say that they didn't pan out the way they were supposed to. They just didn't have the future we were hoping for. So we put them on the shelf, and then a couple of them I just said, I'm done. And I just, that's hard too, because you got all these people relying on you in those companies, and all of a sudden you're just like, okay, well, we're done doing that. Sorry. good luck, guys. And that's a hard decision, but it's either you or them. And I hate to say it that way, but sometimes that's what it is. You got to protect the people that are protecting you and focus on your core and your culture. And you can lose that culture real quick when you're trying to run in too many different directions, because just like you said, how you perceive yourself and how you come into the office and that aura you give is what everybody else sees, and that molds what everybody else is going to feel like and do.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And you're having a bad day and you come in and you're like that, then yeah, I mean, it just kind of flows throughout the folks, all the different people. And that's a huge piece, right? That's a huge variable that as you scale and as you get a bigger team, that doesn't know all of that, or you're trying to keep morale up or whatever it might be. It's difficult to work that through and be able to manage it properly. And some days you're busy, you're out running, you don't want to go into the office or time just doesn't allow it. Well, that's kind of a big piece too, setting the right expectations and managing accordingly and making sure that people realize that that's either a part of the system or there's no reason, there's a specific reason for why that is, and just kind of laying that out there. So it's a very important piece that, I think people probably underestimate, and I definitely did.
Well, I'm sure the audience, is getting some serious knowledge out of this, because you're dropping some bombs, and some of these things are just real life things, folks, that you just got to look at and understand that even the most successful people, the people running multi-million dollar companies like Robert, they all start at the same place. They have those thumps on the head. They have those days where they don't want to get up, they don't want to go to the office, and those days where you just don't know how you're going to get to the next day. That's just part of winning. That's just what it takes to win. And the second you realize that, you're just like, oh, well, that is the game. Great. Well, then you just got to play that game better. And you got to play that game in your mind the best way you know how to play that game. So, Robert, what would be, in parting words, what would be the one piece of advice you could give to all the real estate investors and the Rebel bankers watching this?
Yeah, I mean, setting the realistic expectations with yourself, right? Don't let your mind beat you to some degree as it comes to that. Lining up those different variables and just knowing kind of what's coming. And I mean, you hit a great point there. It's if you realize that that's the case, if you realize that you're going to have those bad days, you're going to have a hard time. If you know that going into it, well, then when you're pulling into the parking lot and all your employees are going to see you, then, shake it off, at least till you get upstairs to your office and then take it back over from there and bear down and get what you got to get done. But kind of applying that and making sure everyone sees, the leader that they need to see is a very big piece. I honestly, I don't think people can discount that enough or can overlook that enough. I think that's a big piece. And then just focusing on what they really want to get out of their business and then creating the system, the process, and the management system to track that and make sure they're staying on point. Like I mentioned, the traction model for us was very, very big, but any model that you follow that tracks your KPIs and allows you to see on a replicable basis kind of what's going on in your business so you can make the adjustments. I think a lot of people miss that. And I think that's a very, very big piece that people need to focus on.
I think that's fantastic. And that's one of the hardest things as a business owner. When you're in business, you're so focused on so many things, and, you literally got a shotgun with birdshot and you're just shooting anything, because you're just trying to make it to the next day. But really the hardest thing is kind of bringing it all in and then focus on just the KPIs, the key policy indicator, or the key, whatever you want to call it. I call them key policy indicators. That's just the old financial advisor world. But, you just, your metrics, your business, your numbers, because it's all numbers. It's just how many people do I have to call for how many people I'm going to get in front of to how many people are actually going to close. You got to know those. And that's what he just said. So you got to take a step back and actually stop running so fast, slow down and plan it out and just figure out, okay, it takes this many calls to get this many appointments to get this much in sales, and then just duplicate that and scale that model. It really, folks, it really is that simple. He just said it. And the one thing I've learned in all the masterminds that I'm in, and Robert's in, one of the masterminds that we're part of, and that's the biggest thing you see. It's always the metrics. It's always numbers. How do we do it? How do we tighten these numbers up? How do we make this machine go faster, smarter, by being smarter and more efficient at what we do. Man, you dropped some great stuff here, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, sharing your knowledge and everything with this podcast. I really appreciate that, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be involved, and I think you got a great thing going. So I'm happy to be here.
If people want to get a hold of you, how would they go about finding you?
Yeah, so they go to robertheyder.com, Robert, Heyder.com. That has all my information. It's got the podcast. It also has our Instagram handle, our Facebook, and all of that information. So you can get it all in one place at robertheyder.com.
Oh, I love that, man. You see that, folks? Right there. All in one place. That is perfect. And, I could take notes from that. You just take it all and put it in one place. So right there, go check his website out, and you guys can learn a whole lot from this guy. So everybody, thank you for joining us for another edition of the Real Estate Money School. I know you guys got just as much out of this as I did. And, you guys got to keep pushing on to your journey of becoming a rebel banker. And remember, it starts now, not tomorrow, not yesterday, right now. That's the only time you can control. So get started. Grab a copy of my book, The Private Money Guide, and my new book is dropping in February, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery. So stay tuned for that and check it out. And you guys keep rolling. Happy holidays. Robert, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris.
All right. Bye, everybody.